Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all once again for sticking with me and giving me the opportunity to share my story as a father, as an advocate, as a husband, and as a grieving angel dad. Now, one thing that I started this podcast to do was to share a dad's perspective, a pediatric cancer perspective from behind the scenes that most people don't get to see or hear. Now, I have had the honor of being able to speak to organizations, being able to speak to mothers and medical professionals, as well as some warriors to really get their inside perspective on this pediatric cancer community. One thing that I have been trying to do as of late is to get more and more fathers to come forward and share their stories, because you may have noticed that throughout the time of me being able to interview people, or just in general with this community, you don't see a lot of dads on the front lines. And I want to make that different. I want to bring their fight to the front and bring their stories out. So I am going to bring you back this week to the very first episode that started it all, a dad's perspective. Please enjoy this episode, and I will see you all next week. All right, everybody, welcome to the very first episode in our series of talking about childhood cancer from a parent's perspective and even from a family's perspective. I will definitely be bringing my wife in here with me, as well as my children at some point, to talk about how they feel about it, how it affected them, both from diagnosis up until our daughter and their sister passed away on July 3rd of 2021. I have many great topics that were actually forwarded to me when I brought this up, and I want to start with a few and see how it goes. And if you guys like the episodes, then I will continue to do this. Talking about this is something that I will never shy away from. I do have people that will ask me about my tattoos, or ask me about my bracelets or my hats and things like that. And then when I explain what they mean, then a lot of times people will apologize for asking, and please don't ever do that. Talking about this is definitely one of the most important things that we can do, and answering your questions, and the reason that we wear things that talk about it, whether it's the bracelets, whether it's, whether I wear JC around my neck, my hat, things like that, it's all meant to bring awareness. It's all meant to spark communication and spark that topic so that we can get more understanding out there. We can get more vision, and giving more vision means we get more support. And that support is going to lead to funding, which is going to lead to better and less toxic treatments in the future, meaning that we're going to have a better future for these kids. And no more families are going to have to go through what we had to go through, or are going to have to sign the types of documents that we had to sign, or that are going to have to hear the words that we heard, make funeral arrangements for their 8-year-old child. These are the things that we're hoping to avoid in the future. We're hoping to eliminate. So from here on out, if you ever see somebody like myself out there, if you see somebody with a ribbon on their shirt, or with, a hat like this out there, if you see the bracelets, ask. You can be respectful. We actually saw somebody in the store the other day, and she had a shirt on that you definitely could tell had to do with childhood cancer. We went up, my wife actually went up and asked her about it, and we got an explanation that what you have to do is you've got to get out there. We love to wear this stuff. We love to spark that conversation. So please never be afraid to ask, never be afraid to put that out there. So going forward, please do that. That's how we spark these conversations. That's how we make a change. So today what I want to talk about, the very first episode here, is I want to talk about how this has affected me as a father and as a husband. We obviously have 2 other daughters. We have a 17-year-old and we have a soon-to-be 15-year-old. And they are very, very important to me. As a matter of fact, having 3 daughters was something that, it'll scare a lot of people to have daughters, but I think it's the greatest thing in the world. I love being a girl dad. I love the new things that I can learn from them as they grow up. I love being there to protect them. I love feeling like I have to protect them. And losing a daughter to this is something that has really affected me to the core, because I was not able to protect her. I was not able to stop the bad things from happening that kept her around longer. And we've had to really hold on to the reality that she was just kind of on loan to us from God, and he had a better and more direct plan for her that she would for her. And unfortunately, that wasn't here on earth, and we know that she's doing amazing things. We know that she's with us, and we feel her, and I will talk about that in a later episode. But the reality is, as a father, or as a parent in general, but if I'm going to tell you from my perspective as a dad, that I feel like I have to protect my children, my family. I feel like I have to provide for my family. My wife and I have been a single income family since my oldest was born, so almost 18 years now. I've been the one that has worked 90% of the time. I took a couple of years off when I went to school, and my wife worked it during that time, but we've been a single income family. We've made it work, and it's always been something that's been a good formula for us. But during this time, you see a lot of families that lose income, that lose their jobs, that because they're not able to be there and provide, or they're not able to work because they need to be there to provide for their kids. And yes, going to work can definitely be a good distraction from everything that's going on. And I did work during my daughter's treatments. When she was going for her treatments in the beginning, I was off for the hospital stays and things like that. And my job was very understanding, which was fantastic. A lot of jobs are not. And I don't think it's because it's a negative thing on the company. I think it's because you're a worker. You're there to work. They need you to work. If you can't work, then they have to have somebody to do that work. And so that may not be the case all the time, but my job was very understanding, and I was very upfront with them about what was going on. But as a father and as a husband, I've always felt like I needed to provide. I needed to be there. And when your daughter is going through, or your child is going through something like this that is very uncontrollable, for me, as a control freak, essentially, I'll call myself out, this is very hard for me to accept because I can't do anything about it. I can't fix it. I can't just wave a magic wand or say some witty dad joke and make it go away. We have to find a way to deal with this. We need to have income so that we can continue to pay the bills. We need to have income to pay for treatments and travel. We need to have income so that our other daughters can continue in their activities or things like that they're going through. So we have to do that, and I have to find a way to make that work. We were very lucky in our family enough that we have saved for quite a while, so we had enough to keep us going. We also had a lot of generosity when our daughter was going through these treatments, both from monetary donations as well as food and gift cards and things like that to help get us through, which is something that you'll notice that also goes away very fast as soon as your child passes, if that's unfortunate enough to happen. And that kind of support tends to go away, and you tend to be back on your own again, which is, again, talk about that in another episode as well. But I always felt like I did something wrong. I always felt like I did not protect you. I did not keep you safe. And how is this not my fault? And, towards the end, in the last couple of weeks of her life, she was starting to lose abilities to speak to us and communicate like she had before. And because of that, it led to a lot of insomnia on her part, and just her brain just wouldn't shut off and would not allow her to sleep and things like that. And what it did was it caused me and my wife, for that matter, to be very, very tired. When we're talking days and days and days with no sleep or very lack of, and it got to the point where I would get frustrated with her. Didn't do anything crazy, but definitely I would raise my voice and I would get frustrated, and you can hear it. And I never meant anything by it. I wasn't mad at her. It was my frustration because of the lack of sleep and, the fact that nothing was going right. And my daughter her body was slowly shutting down, and there was nothing that we could do about it. And I have regretted that. I've regretted that every single day. And, we even spoke to a medium, my wife and I, after she passed. And, as much as you believe in that, that's fine. For us, it really helped us. It really helped us cope. But that was one thing that I always worried about. Is she mad at me? Does she forgive me for being frustrated with her, or not being able to help her, or not being able to fix her? And it was never like that. If you believe it, like I said, then she did forgive me, and she knew that I never meant to be angry with her. But as a dad, you're supposed to protect your kids. You're supposed to make sure that nothing ever happens to them. You're supposed to keep them safe. As a dad, as a father, you're supposed to provide. You're supposed to make sure that they have everything they need all the time. You're supposed to make sure your kids have more than you did as a kid. And you're supposed to make sure that nothing ever hurts them. I remember in the hospital when we were first told that it was a tumor, my emotions and my reaction were very blank and very monotone, because it was disbelief. But my first instinct, because our daughter was actually sleeping when they told us this because she was exhausted, my first instinct was just to grab my wife and just hold her. We'll get this going. And I remember after signing that, and I broke down. That was the first time that I really broke down, because I felt like we failed her. I felt like what did we do wrong? We're trying to rack our brains about what did we do to cause this? And the reality is, you didn't do anything, and we didn't do anything. Childhood cancer, unfortunately, is about 99% shitty luck, and we did everything we could the right way. Unfortunately, they just happen sometimes. So that was me being emotional the very first time. Breaking down that very first time was after I signed that consent for her to have the surgery. And this was just to put a drain in her brain. That's when I broke down the first time. But then I had to pick myself back up because I had to get right back into it. I had to then call into work. I had to create an FMLA case. I had to make sure that the bills were going to get paid. We had to update our kids. Like, for me, I've never once had an off button. I've never once had the ability to just shut off what's going on around me. I have to be doing something, and I know that I have responsibilities. So as that father figure and as that husband and as that provider, I felt like that was what I had to do. I needed to suck it up. I needed to pull up the bootstraps, whatever you want to say, and I needed to just stick with being that person. Jace was going to be okay. I knew it in my heart. She went through that surgery. We did everything we needed to do. Like, she recovered well from every single thing that happened to her in that hospital. We spent 12 days there, from being at home celebrating our daughter's birthday, our oldest daughter's birthday, to rushing to Milwaukee Children's Hospital. We were there for 12 days. We were there so long that there was still snow on the car when we went outside. And it had been sitting there for 12 days in the visitors parking lot because I never moved it. We were hoping it was going to start. We didn't even tell our other kids that we were coming home on that day. They were going to release us. We went over to our daughter's school and we surprised them coming home. Jace was over it at that point. She actually just wanted to go home. She didn't want to be at the school. And it wasn't because she didn't love it being there, but she just wanted to go home, which is understandable. We had spent 12 days away from home. They did come out and visit us a couple days after, but it was tough. But it was also on me, or I took the responsibility of really keeping everybody updated through Facebook and through Messenger, phone calls and things like that. I did everything I could to keep the world updated on what was going on with JC, and at the same time creating this hashtag, creating a movement to try to make a difference and try to explore and find. I was finding people to outreach to. I was finding people to talk to. People were out reaching out to us. That's where we met our first real friend and real confidant in that hospital setting. It was actually right after we got home. Was another little girl that had the exact same type of cancer as JC. She's a little bit younger. And we basically befriended this couple, and it just turned into something where we were there for them and they were there for us. And when our daughter was up, their daughter was down, and it just kind of became that process. And then as dads, we could talk back and forth and kind of open up to each other in a way that maybe we didn't feel comfortable talking to our wives. Or for me, as a personal person, from what I do, I don't talk about feelings a lot with my wife or with, that, because I always feel like I'm overshadowing what she's going through. I will from time to time have really bad days, and she can tell, and then I will tell her what's going on. But I always stop and think that, you and I are kind of going through the same thing. We saw the same things. We heard the same things. She had a different connection with JC than I did, and I had a connection with her that was a little bit different because I was in the hospital with her for the 5 days, 6 days, for the 2 months, for, all the surgeries, for all of the chemos. I was there for her. My wife was there for most of the radiations, and I was there for some of them. And, any of that stuff, so it gave us different perspectives. But I try not to open up to her about those things, not because I don't feel like she deserves to know or deserves to understand, but I always feel like I'm overshadowing. So my advice to you, and something else that I'll talk about in a later episode as well, is how a marriage can be made to work through all of this, when the success rate for marriages going through something like this is very, very low. We were very lucky, and I can tell you that there were some times that, I talked to her the other day, and I think I'll bring her on for that episode, that it was shaky, and it was definitely a question as to whether or not we were going to make it. But my advice is be open. Be open and talk to your spouse, to your partner about these things. You are going through the same things, but you are going to feel them. I felt them differently than my wife did. And I think it's really good to get that out there and to have an open dialogue about that. Now, like I said, as a father and as a dad, I felt like I had to be that lead role. I had to make the decisions. I had to be the one that didn't sleep. I had to be the one that had to work. I had to bring in the paycheck. I had to provide. That was me. I was the provider, and I was supposed to be the protector, and I felt like I failed in those aspects. And sometimes, unfortunately, that can be the downfall of a lot of people, is to feel that failure. But at the same time, I know that we did everything we could with the tools that we had to provide our daughter with the best treatment possible. And, going back, are there things that we could change or we would change? There may be some, absolutely. If, now, or we knew then what we know now type of thing, then I'd say, yeah, absolutely. There's some things we would do differently or maybe research differently. But does it guarantee a different output? No. So in closing, I say that as a father, as a parent, as a husband, yes, I felt like I shouldered the weight of so much, but I shouldered that weight on my own. I didn't shoulder that weight because my wife didn't shoulder it or my kids didn't, my family, my friends. I shouldered it because I felt like I had to. And that's just me. That's just me as a person. And I feel like that's just who I am. And that may be how a lot of people are. As fathers, as husbands, as men in general, this just a general perspective is that I think that we tend to shoulder it because we feel like we have to, and we feel like we're meant to do that, not because it's the way it's supposed to be, just because we feel like that's what we're supposed to do. So I hope that this gives you a little insight into our life, and I definitely want to continue these series. You just have to let me know if it's something that I should keep going with. I have plenty of topics to talk about, and I want to be able to speak to you. So thank you very much, and I hope you come back and hear some more.